hate is like the fancy pottery in love's restaurant. Some days, it is not used, but like greed, we never quite forget about it. Of course we don't forget. We always fight for the power of selflessness, yet we fail to pursue what matters most. Otters. In case you didn't catch it yet, everything I said in the last 20 seconds is, we'll say, malarkey. It made no sense. I put specific inflation in my voice at times when appropriate, but I think the only true message I conveyed there is that I'm arrogant. Now that you know what's going on, let's try another one, but this time really pay attention. This is a quote from Professor Lancelot Hogben, 1943. Quote, "Above all, we cannot play ducks and drakes with a native battery of idioms which prescribes egregious collocations of vocables as the basic put up with for tolerate or put at a loss for bewilder." This sentence became famous after George Orwell, the man himself, criticized the unnecessary complexity of this statement. Let's look at that sentence one more time. In fact, pause the video right now and I'll put it up on the screen. It's also in the description below. Just try to figure out what it means. You can take as much time as you want. I'll be here waiting. Alright, starting now. Alright, that's it. I assume you're back after failing miserably. And you know what? That's 100% understandable. I had to look up George Orwell's piece and ask a user, what the heck does this mean? Even if you look up every individual word, the definition of which at least, you still won't be able to figure out because putting all of the words together requires, I don't know, some magic wizardry. Alright, I'll do my best to try to explain what the heck this sentence actually is saying, so let's go through it one step at a time here. So, it starts with above all, which is self-explanatory. Next, it says, quote, "We cannot play ducks and drakes with," which basically means we cannot waste our time with. It was an expression back then, I assume. Okay, fine, he gets one confusing phrase. I mean, we don't use that anymore, I assume, but that's fine. Next. Alright, then it gets difficult. So, we shouldn't waste our time with, quote, "a native battery of idioms which prescribes egregious collocations of vocables." Okay, yeah. So that phrase that I just said means something along the lines of, quote, translating words into basic ugly phrases. So what he's trying to say is we shouldn't be wasting our time translating perfectly good words into basic ugly phrases. And then next, he ends the quote, he says, quote, "as the basic put up with for tolerate or put at a loss for bewilder." So he's basically saying, why are we saying the phrase put up with when we already have a perfectly good word that means exactly that, which is tolerate, put up with? Why do we have to say put at a loss when we already have a perfectly good verb which already means that? Bewilder. Overall, Mr. Hogben is making a pretty simple point that we shouldn't be turning our already good existing words into weird, ugly-looking phrases. That's all he's trying to say. And he says this in possibly the most confusing manner to mankind, I think. Even though he's the one trying to give a message, you can't really, in this case, blame the people listening for looking at that sentence and then thinking, man, this is not worth figuring out. Because they're correct, it isn't. This brings us to a much larger point, which applies today, which is typically when we listen to someone speak, or we read something in the news, if we don't understand something that person said, we typically give them the benefit of the doubt that, hey, maybe I just didn't understand what they're saying. And then we move on. And while most speakers and writers have good intent, they don't try to purposefully trick you, it's not always going to be the case where it's your fault. Some speakers may not even be aware that they're saying something in a confusing manner, so you always want to give them that benefit of the doubt. But just be aware that it's not your fault. If someone says something that is confusing you, don't just move on, basically. Try to, if possible, ask for clarification or do some research. The point of this video is to tell you that there are a lot of eloquent speakers and a lot of very good writers that are out there in the world producing content, but don't be fooled if you're ever confused by something they say. Lingual manipulation can happen on so many different accounts and in so many different ways. And if we don't pay attention to this manipulation, sometimes our minds just go on autopilot, especially if we're listening to somebody that we already trust. We get a false sense of understanding while we subconsciously assure ourselves that, yeah, I'm pretty sure that what that person said made sense. Because saying pretty sure, in that case, is equivalent to saying not at all. The next time you listen to, let's say, a politician, don't pay attention to them. Pay attention to the sole words they are saying. Turn your brain into a telegram for a few minutes. Don't read their expressions, their passion. Read their actual word-to-word message. See if you can paraphrase even their message. Sum it up in your own words. It can be difficult to do this sometimes, especially if you already like the person that's speaking. If you have no trouble at all understanding what that person is saying, chances are they're being fairly transparent with their message. But at the same time, if you experience moments in which you realize that the speaker is talking very quickly, or using unnecessarily large vocabulary words, or using old or dying metaphors, or talks a lot about the power of love and spirit and otters all conjuncted into one delicious strawberry smoothie, don't assume it's just your lack of understanding, because that very mindset is the same one they might be relying on you to have. I'll be honest, I got this video idea because a lot of times I find myself struggling to understand 100% of what people say, especially in the realm of politics. Sometimes, and it's not their fault, by the way, it's my actual lack of understanding. I have to, take a few minutes to research exactly on the topic that they're talking about. But sometimes when I do that research, or if I see that, one person is avoiding a question or saying something that doesn't exactly match in terms of logic, it's good not to just skip that part and listen to the rest. It's really important to be super critical and judge according to whether you think this was a purposeful manipulation or a simple mistake. It's also a lot more fun and interactive when you listen to people exactly like that. You might also improve your everyday conversation, because once you get used to the patterns certain people use in order to try to, with language, manipulate a certain topic or phrase, you start to see a pattern really in how people interact and how they can get their way just by using the power of language. But yeah, that's it. I hope, if you weren't already aware, you are now, of the importance of looking at not the, dimensions of the book, not the font of the text, but the text itself. And I hope that metaphor makes sense. Thanks for watching.